All right, hey Tyler, excited to have you on here with us, man, and talk about how culture eats everything, but talk about what you do. Um, and I don't even want to spoil the name of the company that you run. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this. So yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Less Annoying CRM. So most people by now know what a CRM is, but if not, it's like a customer relationship manager, just kind of a database of a business's customer information. And so yeah, I've been doing it for about 13 years. My brother and I started it back in 2009, and basically there are a million CRMs out there. It's like one of the most competitive markets in all of technology. But the niche we fill is like people who don't want to be using a CRM, people who hate software, they hate technology, they don't understand how any of it works, and just kind of trying to get out of your way as much as possible, rather than everyone else is mostly competing on having the most features and the best automation and like new AI stuff. We're kind of competing by not having all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a really interesting niche to carve out, which is, and that's how we found each other. Is that I am a customer because I don't know that I would have said I don't want a CRM, but I guess I definitely was like stumbling into like, man, we need something more. And the more I tried lots of different things, and so many of them, like you pay for almost every single thing you click on. And so it started becoming a like, man, do we really need this? And so I don't even remember how I stumbled across, but just the name Less Annoying, I was like, oh, that's hilarious. I had to check this out. And then as I started using it, it really was less annoying. It was amazing. So
I appreciate that.
yeah, so that's an interesting like contrarian form of marketing. And yeah, so how did you get into that? Like, has the space been this competitive for this whole time that you've been doing it?
Yeah. So Salesforce is the big CRM out there, and they started in 1999, so 10 years before us. And they're basically the founder, the creator of the software as a service business model. So CRM was kind of the first cloud-based B2B software product. The way I got into it, I was working at a different startup. So I started this company at age 24. So I don't have a ton of professional experience prior to this, but wow. I worked at one startup for a couple of years before this, and they just put me in charge of setting up Salesforce. And I have a degree in computer science. I like to think I'm pretty tech savvy. I spent a full month, full time, just trying to like, not like use it, just understand how to set it up so other people could use it. And I never got it. Like I literally just went back to my boss and I was like, you got to find someone else for this. I can't figure it out. And then, it occurred to me, well, what about a dentist office or an insurance agent or someone who doesn't have me? I say me, I didn't even get it working, but like, what do those businesses do for a CRM? So there's more to the story, but that's the basic thing that got me first thinking like, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. And better utilize your skills and become an entrepreneur. That's super cool. Well, tell us a little more. Just like you said, you started this with your brother. So just personally, where do you live? What are you up to?
Yeah, so started the company in San Francisco, and like a big part of our story is we kind of started as a typical like tech company with like illusions of grandeur or whatever, and then kind of over the years we moved to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm from, and have kind of settled into. Like the tech industry has this idea that you're either a $1 billion company or you're a failure. And we're trying to like be a tech small business. And there aren't really a lot of those out there. There's a lot of small businesses in general, but normally you don't think of a software company that way. Sure. So that's kind of where we're at. My brother is also we're both kind of engineering backgrounds. Started it together and built the product together. And he's in Boston. He's one of the few people not in St. Louis now, but yeah, just kind of growing it bit by bit.
Yeah, well, and grown bit by bit. Talk about that. Well, one, it is funny to go from San Francisco to St. Louis. That's not thought of as like the Silicon Valley of middle America, but I don't think anywhere is. So that's fun. Well, yeah, talk about the growth. Like you've been at this for 13 years, so it's not new. What's been kind of some of the big mile markers along the journey for you?
Yeah. So a big, huge part of it, and I know we're going to talk about culture, and to me, almost everything from business model to product to culture comes down to one decision we made, which is to not raise money from venture capitalists. The last startup, like almost every tech company raises from VCs, and it impacts everything about how the company behaves, because now all of a sudden whatever goals you had, the goal is now to get returns for your shareholders.
Okay.
And so all the things that we do differently from other companies really come down to the fact that we don't have shareholders to represent. Now, in the early days in San Francisco, yeah, so the bootstrapping model is you build a product and you just try to sell it however you can. I'm not good at the growth thing, but did what I could. And, in the early days, when you have 10 customers, it's not that hard to double to 20. Yeah, none of it's easy. No part of it's easy, but you can it looks like you've got kind of rocket ship growth going on in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first few years, I was like, wow, if all we have to do is 10x every year and ... I'll be a billionaire soon. Because we were 10xing for a couple of years there. And then it turns out that's just because we were dealing with very small numbers. And as soon as reality sunk in, it was like, okay, you can go raise money, hire a sales team, raise your prices, do all the things that run the playbook that every other CRM company is doing. That's how you grow fast. Or you can just lean into still exciting growth, but more modest, small business type sustainable growth. And so we took the latter path. That's when we moved to St. Louis and kind of said, we're growing. So right now we're at 19 employees. We've got 25,000 users. So we're not small, but we're also a fraction of, the Salesforces of the world.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it's not small, and you found your niche. So where did the idea not to raise funds with venture capitalists? Where did that wisdom come from, or that
scars, you might call them?
Sure.
The last company I said I worked at that other startup for 2 years. I learned a whole lot there. And some of it was I learned what to do, but a lot of it I'm so grateful for is I learned a lot of stuff I didn't want to do. That startup had raised just the classic, raise a Series A from venture capitalists. I was employee number 8. I think they were at maybe 30 people a year later. So really fast growth. That was 2008. So what happened in 2008? Everyone got laid off. The Great Recession kicked in. They kept the 5 cheapest people. Thankfully, I was one of those 5. So thank you. Yeah, it's one of the few times being underpaid actually works out. Yeah. But so for the next year, me and one other guy there, I was kind of on the product. I took over the product and he took over sales and growth and all that. And we just acted like co-founders because literally the CEO laid himself off. There was no one above us at the company anymore. So it was a great entrepreneurial, I feel like I shortcut my career by 10 years with that experience, but also a lot of my friends got laid off and it was terrible. And I was just the fragility of the business model and so many everything I hated about working there, honestly, came down to the fact that what I wanted was different from what the investors wanted. And it's not that they were wrong. They were probably running the right playbook for getting a good return on investment, but I don't want to devote my professional life to getting returns for shareholders. That's just not interesting to me.
Yeah. Super. That's amazing. Because it's like you said, it's not right or wrong. It was just this clarity that you came to of that's not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So talk about that. What do you want to do? I mean, you're doing it at Less CRM in that way, but what is it that became clear for you?
That's a great question. And it's kind of a deep question because the normal playbook so there's the venture capital playbook. The playbook for bootstrappers like me is normally get the company big enough that you can sell it and never have to work again. And we're that size. Now's not a great time to sell a business, but a year ago, probably could have sold the company and made enough money to, be pretty wealthy for the rest of my life if I wanted, and chose not to do that. And I think it just comes down to it's kind of a fun game for me. Sort of that makes it sound unimportant. I don't mean it that way. It's very important to me, but at this point, it's just I can't think of something more challenging and engaging to do with my time. So I choose to do this. And in particular, the serving customers and making, when we get feedback from customers, I still read every single piece of feedback we get. Every morning I have a summary that's here's what everyone said. Wow. That's great. Yeah. And even more than that, not that I care more about employees than customers, but you have so much more of an impact on employees. One employee is so much more impacted by their employer than any customer is. Yeah. That has become a huge motivating factor for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into just talking about culture, because when you say this is so much more fun, it's, what is this? It's leading an organization, in your case, Less Annoying CRM. it's not like that exists. There's Tyler and there's the 19 people. I mean, it's the people that are the organization, and it's the people that serve the customer. So it's all people stuff.
Yeah.
So talk about that when you say like the game of this, like it seems like you've kind of figured out how to create it, carve a niche out, create a CRM. Like that's maybe not as much the game anymore. What is the game that keeps you going, that is a challenge and fun?
Yeah, and it's honestly both right now, because like in the early days, my background is in technology and product. I love designing and building software. And if you'd asked me when we started, I would have been like, my dream job is no employees, never talk to a customer, right? Just like they exist to give me money, but all I'm doing all day is just building really cool stuff. And I still like that every bit as much as I ever did. And I actually have been making changes to free up more of my time to do that recently. But at the time, I thought of people as just being this like pointless distraction. Like, why would I want to spend my time emailing with customers when like the way I can provide value is making the product better? Why would I want to like manage people? Everyone has this idea in their head of like, everyone hates their manager, not like literally, but that's kind of the trope, right?
Yeah.
And why would I want to be in that role that everyone thinks is like an empty suit? And what really changed for me is I have trouble having empathy for abstract, hypothetical people, but I, like most people, have empathy for real humans that I meet in real life, right? So with customers, it changed where like the first time a customer called I don't know why I put my phone number on our website. That wasn't like, I just wasn't thinking. And I got the first call from a customer and they were like, I can't believe you picked up the phone. I've called 20 CRM companies. You're the first one that picked up. And I was like, oh, customers are cool. All right. Yeah. And then the same thing happened with employees. Like we hired our first employee and I was just like, this is a real human being who I like. And I want them to be happy and all that stuff. And it just kind of naturally became a priority for me.
Yeah. Is the people part, which like I guess you said, it's the customer facing side, and then it's leading your employees and growing. What is it that today, like you love your job? Why? Especially after 13 years.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think most people would love my job, to be like, I think part of it's just, I don't know, I'm weird, but, one of the great things about bootstrapping and going slowly and like being able to fail without like make small mistakes without the company falling apart is over time, I've just gotten to be able to make it exactly what I want it to be. The stuff I like doing, I do more of. The stuff I don't like doing, I do less of. But maybe more specifically, yeah, like one of the most fulfilling things is the team and the culture, hiring new people. Like, let me just give you a very specific example.
Yeah.
We have a company tradition that started when we were in San Francisco called Shabu Night. Are you familiar with like shabu shabu, like the Japanese fondue meal?
Nope.
It's a good meal. If people haven't had it, go try it out. But it's basically like you cook Japanese meats in a broth, whatever. It's the point of the meal isn't that important. But when we started doing this, we kind of came up with this tradition that was everyone would like toast someone else at the table. And it started out, there were no employees. So it was just my friends doing this. But now we did this as a company. We just did it a few weeks ago. And everyone just kind of toasts each other and says like a thing they're appreciative of. And like hearing the employees say like nice things about each other to each other and just like seeing that they are happy here and they're getting fulfillment out of their lives. Like, I don't know, like it just doesn't get better than that, you know?
Absolutely. Well, and then, from my side as a customer too, it's kind of funny to talk about it with you, like to be able to affirm that, going like, oh, there's definitely like good cultural things you guys have going on, because every interaction I've had with people, including you, but before I was like, hey, I wonder if we could get your CEO on a podcast. It was just very positive, very like, we love what we're doing. How can we help you? And so it was tangible. Like I could just
Awesome.
tell, man, whatever's happening at Less Annoying is great. And their name's Less Annoying. It's just awesome. And it just leads itself to really funny jokes all the time. Cause we're, if we say LA CRM, it sounds kind of like hip and Los Angeles. But when I've been onboarding my business partners and them around, like, here's how we're going to use this. Here's how it's going to help us. They're all like, oh, this really is less annoying. I'm like, I'm telling you, it just is.
You're bringing a smile to my face. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's because it's really been, super helpful for us, but it's that part that what you are creating that's so important. So how do you, like, when you sit here today and you think like, all right, in a couple of years, we keep at this and we've got 100 staff, what do you feel like that's going to require culturally for you to get better at, to lead differently?
Yeah. So this isn't quite an answer to that question, but like a thing like my brother and I have talked a lot about that we're not sure of is like, would we want to get that big? And to some extent, it's not up to us. Like we're currently growing, but we're not growing at a pace where we'll ever be 100 people, but that could change certainly. Sure. You probably know more about this than me, but when I've read about this, like I've read that around 30 to 50 employees is where the small business feel just has to change. Does that match your kind of experience?
For sure. Yep. Very much is like, there's some threshold in there. You don't know when you cross it, but 50 definitely seems to be the high end of like, you can't keep operating in the same way. And that's not, it's not right or wrong. It's just, you're no longer small or mom and pop but you can stay at a lot of you can choose to be very conscious and intentional it sounds like you've been trying to be.
Yeah. I've heard that there's even kind of like sociologists have, like, if you study ancient civilizations, there's evidence that this 30 to 50 number is like, when do tribes have to elect leaders rather than just everyone shows up at a meeting together, that type of thing. So I will say, like, it's not clear to me if we got to 30 people, maybe we'd stop, not stop operating the business, but maybe we'd say like, how can we serve more customers with the same team? But yeah, if you go beyond that, at the same time, like when I look back 10 years, I miss a lot of the things from the early days of the company. It's a whole different vibe of just like, I didn't have to have a schedule, whereas now I basically have a 9-to-5 job and stuff like that. But it's always replaced by a new challenge that's worth it. So the thing I've been asking myself is, would there be so many great new things at 50 or 70 or 100 people that would make it worth it? Because I know I would lose a lot of the things that I love about the company right now.
Yeah, well, that's fair. And I mean, to be fair to you, like sort of like the pandemic taught us, you're trying to predict a future that you have no idea. So you'll figure it out when you get there. So talk more about the culture stuff. When that's something that you're obviously very excited about. One of the things that you had said to me was, if you had asked me 13 years ago, if this is the stuff I'd love working on, what is it that changed over that time? And how do you see your role today maybe differently than you did back then?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One is, again, just once you actually meet the people and see the impact you can have on real human beings, it becomes real. And it's the same way, like a lot of people care about their family, but don't care about a stranger in another state.
Sure.
Or like when people are driving and they have road rage, they're mad at the car. They're not mad at the person in the car. Sure. Just meeting people, it makes it a lot more real. And I hadn't had that experience when I started, so I didn't think I would like it. The other thing is I just have a much deeper appreciation of how important and hard it is to do the culture stuff. Because, all the advice for CEOs is like, get all the little stuff off your plate and just do the most important, most impactful, big picture stuff. Like if you're raising money for investors, that's what you should be doing. Make strategic decisions on the product, hire executives. Don't waste your time on all the tiny little stuff. And my experience though has been like, the way culture forms is all the tiny stuff. And it's just so, I don't know. It's like, it's a totally different challenge from all the other CEO work. And it's a nice change of pace from the big picture stuff, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you are in a software as a service and the CRM computer world. I mean, there's so much engineering and problem solving that goes into that. But when you think about leading people and having to understand, like you have to understand computers and software stuff that I don't get to make Less Annoying possible. But to lead people means you have to understand how they operate, how they work, which is, kind of an infinite game. It's so much to understand, and neuroscience keeps teaching us more things. And like you mentioned, sociology, even when you said abstract empathy, like it's very true. You go back to like tribes and stuff. I saw this thing a few years ago that just talked about how throughout human history, like we just aren't built to care, to be able to care for everybody's needs in the world, which is why headlines just become, we lose empathy for real people and real problems because we're so inundated with it today. We have so much information. It's amazing, but we can lose that empathy piece. But sorry, go back to like getting under the hood and learning to understand people. What have you felt like you've learned, whether it's about yourself or just about the people you're leading?
Yeah, I think you made a great comparison between people and technology, because like, it's not like, yeah, I know a lot of people are intimidated by technology and don't necessarily think they know how it works. But if there's one thing to understand, it's that it'll do exactly what you tell it, right? If you learn how technology works, you just give it the command and it does it. And that's all there is to it. And like, people are just so the opposite, where, not even that, like, I want to command people, like that's not a good form of leadership anyway, but the things to worry about are so counterintuitive. Like the things, it's, for example, I have found just anytime I want an employee to do something that's against their best interests, no matter what I do, doesn't work. You just have to like make it not against their best interests, if that makes sense. Like, just all these companies have, we're going to force people to work longer hours. We've got crunch mode. We've got this or that. And I've just found anytime what the person wants goes against what you're asking them to do, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's the type of thing that is like so different from the technical side.
Yeah. Well, so how do you tap into that? What is, like, someone doesn't want to work more hours, but at the same time, you need people passionate and excited and engaged in the job. So what have you found works?
Sorry, I muted myself
no
there.
worries. No
Apologies. Yeah, I don't want to act. So first of all, I'm figuring this out just like everybody else is, but
totally get it.
One thing we've done from a culture standpoint that I would not have guessed in the early days would make sense is we've based our whole culture around, almost every tech company is going to do one of two things. They're going to base their culture either around the business side of things, marketing and sales, especially. That's what Salesforce, IBM, Oracle do. Or they're going to base it around the kind of technical engineering culture. Google really popularized this. We decided that customer service was going to be the cultural cornerstone of the team. As a matter of fact, half of our developers right now came from the customer service team and learned to code from there.
Oh, wow.
So the consequence of this is, by Google's standards, we probably don't have the strongest engineering team. And I want to be clear, I'm not insulting them, because what I'm saying is they're good at a thing that Google doesn't value, which is like intrinsically caring about people, right? And being able to, like, if I give them a design to implement and they start working on it, they can just tell, like, I can tell that this thing isn't going to work. And they'll come back to me and be like, can we revisit this, rather than just being like, well, that's the specs, I'm going to do it. So one way we've kind of gotten around this is, if everybody at the company, without any external motivation, they just intrinsically want to please customers, everything else kind of falls in place from there.
That makes a ton of sense, and almost seems so obvious. And yet we know it's not that easy, and definitely is not always normal. So how do you back that all the way up then, when you talk about the excitement of hiring new people? Like, how do you find people who intrinsically care about the customer, or do you find ways to instill that? How do you find someone that cares?
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's also not as hard as it sounds. This is the number one reason we left San Francisco, because I loved living in San Francisco personally. And I wasn't exactly looking to leave, but there's this, for people who don't know San Francisco well, it's the tech capital of the world. Like, you go to a bar, talk to the first 10 people you see, they all work at, he works at Dropbox, she works at Google, like they all work at tech companies. And everybody just has this idea of what a tech company is. And what it is automating away every single thing that requires a human, so that you can reach the scale of a Facebook or a Google with a relatively small group of people. When we decided we wanted to hire really great customer service people, that was the first real hire we made. Aside, like, the first hires were my friends, so I didn't have to recruit them. After I ran out of friends, I was like, okay, how do we find a stranger who cares about customers? It was impossible in San Francisco. Not to say those people don't exist, but it's a needle in a haystack type of thing.
Okay. Interesting.
So we move back to St. Louis and it's much, much easier. So first of all, I just think the culture of the place you are is part of it.
Sure.
The other thing is we've kind of built a culture around appealing to people who are really disillusioned by typical corporate America. Yeah. The type of person who would, have a degree from a expensive 4-year college and then go be a barista at a coffee shop. Like that's kind of our core demographic here.
Okay.
Because that person has the ability to do whatever they want, and they've decided that they'd rather not get mixed up in things. And not all of I'm not saying everyone like that is a great fit for us, but that's a good starting point to say, would you like a job where you can just care about customers and you don't have metrics to hit and you don't have bureaucracy and your day is not full of meetings? All you have to do is just try to provide value to the customer and that's it. And there are a lot of people out there like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes a ton of sense. Because they've put themselves in the place to, like you said, barista is a great example. I still think back to my days serving people at Chili's, which I hate to brag, but I was a server for 4 years at Chili's, but I freaking loved it. Like if I could have made better money, I just loved, like, it's like if I was going to go into medicine, I'd want to be in emergency medicine. Like that just, you're constantly turning over. It's different. So it's interesting, like the psychology behind the kinds of people that are, that would be attracted to that type of job. But you've been able to stay really crystal clear about what's going to be core from the beginning, which picking that and then sticking to that, it's that good to great flywheel. Like the longer you do it, the better it gets. And then keeps presenting new challenges to figure out. What were we going to say?
Well, yeah, one of my big learnings about business in general, but certainly this also applies to culture stuff, is just there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work fast. And so people try it and they try to go fast and it fails. And their conclusion is that that plan didn't work. And in fact, if they had just taken twice as long, it would have worked. So a lot of the stuff we're doing, it works, but like we're 13 years in, making $3.5 million a year in revenue. To some people, they'd say like, wow, amazing success. To any tech startup person, they'd be like, that's a failure. Like your investors will have shut you down by the time you get there. So just like, it's such a superpower to be able to take your time and do things that they work over decades, but they don't work over, a much smaller time period.
Yeah. Well, that's some good wisdom, that you've had the misfortune of a bad first startup experience that became a very fortunate perspective giving that created that clarity. So what would you say to somebody today who's maybe sitting in their job with some of those feelings and experiences of like, this isn't what I want, but I don't really know what to do? Like, how do you make that jump?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's situation's different, but I'll say, I don't think if you looked at me on paper when I started Less Annoying CRM, I don't think you saw an entrepreneur. Partially, I don't think I had a lot of interest in it, but also I don't think you saw like any amazing skills. I'm a generalist. I'm good at a lot of stuff. I'm not trying to downplay what I can do, but like as a software engineer, I'm good. I'm not great. As a designer, I'm good. I'm not great. There was no one thing you'd look at and say, wow, that's someone capable of starting a business. The one thing I think I did well that I think almost anyone can emulate is understanding risk. And in particular, I think a lot of people think that starting a business is a lot riskier than it is, especially when they're young. I'll admit, as I get older and older, I'm like, wow, it would be hard to start. It would be harder to start now.
Yeah, sure.
But when I was 24 years old and I quit my job and moved to San Francisco and started a business with no investors, a lot of people I knew, they were trying to be supportive, but I could tell they were like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. And my answer was like, if this doesn't work, I'll just go get a job. Like, there's no risk here at all, really.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are waiting for the perfect time and they're waiting, and it never gets easier. It never gets better. But the reality is you can start something and fail entirely and it's still probably going to be okay.
Right. Yeah. Because when you say understanding risk well, it seemed like the way I hear it, and most people probably do, is the opposite. It's like he knew how to take the right calculated risk. And it was like, no, it's just don't overinflate it also. Like,
yeah. And
Well,
also, like, the big advantage small businesses have over big ones is you can try all kinds of stuff. Like, your
yeah.
competitors are not going to be able to try all the crazy ideas you have. So take those risks early on when you've got nothing to lose.
Sure, sure. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I feel like I could talk to you about all kinds of other stuff, which would be fun, but I want to just try to keep it to around 30 minutes. So tell us, as we wrap up, like, what's one book you'd really recommend other people to read, or one like parting thought where you're like, people just you need to hear this.
Yeah.
This is, I've learned. What is it?
Can I do one of each? A book and a parting thought?
Yeah.
Okay. The book I'm going to do is called The Mom Test. Have you heard of this one?
No, The Mom Test.
Yeah. One reason I love it is it's super short. I get so bored reading long business books personally. But it's basically about how to talk to people so they don't lie to you. The reason it's called The Mom Test is if you ask your mom, do you like my startup idea? She's going to say yes, because she loves you. How do you get your mom to tell you the truth? And this is helpful for sales. It's helpful for customer interviews. And it's also super, super helpful for talking to employees, because there's such a power dynamic between the boss and the employee. I didn't realize this early on. I was like, I'm approachable. I'm a friendly guy. They can tell me the truth, but they won't, because they're afraid to. You need to build, there's a whole separate thing about building trust and all that, but the way you ask questions and the way you kind of carry yourself in a conversation, you can get the truth out of people who otherwise would be afraid to tell you the truth.
Yeah, give us an example of that, because that's super intriguing. But like, tell me how, especially when you talk about the power dynamics, because it's really hard to be aware of that, and how that plays into things. So
so first of all, just an example of these power dynamics, if people don't know what I'm talking about. If you go up to an employee and are like, hey, can I see you in the conference room real quick? 10 out of 10 times they think they're fired. It doesn't matter any other context.
For sure.
But yeah, so like an example that when you ask them a question, they're going to be playing politics, even if they're good people, all that, they're going to be worrying about themselves. So you ask questions about true falsifiable things. So rather than saying, hey, I had this idea, do you think it's a good idea? They're probably gonna be like, well, you're the boss. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Instead, you can be like, hey, have you ever Googled for this? Like, have you ever experienced this problem before? And if they're like, yeah, what'd you do? What'd you do when you experienced that problem? They don't know what you're thinking yet.
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, I didn't do anything. I just let it go. And that tells you something. Or they'll be like, well, I looked for a solution. I couldn't find a solution. Or I asked somebody for a solution. Yeah. If you just ask them factual questions about their real behavior in the past, as opposed to hypothetical questions,
sure,
they're much more likely to give you the truth. And then you can, from that, I mean, the book goes into this in way more detail, but you can build off of that to come up with some insights you couldn't get otherwise.
Yeah. Wow, that's brilliant. That's a great book idea. And the title is so funny, because I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good book.
No, it doesn't.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a great book option. All right. What's the one thing you want to say?
My biggest thing about culture, that I'm not saying every company's culture is different. You don't have to do what I do, but the number one cornerstone of my leadership model as it relates to culture is to lead by example. And that especially means leaders. So there's a book called Leaders Eat Last.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even recommend reading the book necessarily, but the title says it all. Like, if someone gets a corner office, unless you can give every single person at the company a corner office, like I have the worst office, and extrapolate that through all parts of the company. If there's something that's not working for me about working at Less Annoying CRM, rather than fixing it for me, I have to fix the policy for everybody. When I wanted more remote work, I gave everyone more remote flexibility. When I wanted an equipment budget so I could get a better chair, I gave everyone that equipment budget. Just like treating yourself exactly like every other employee is a cheat code for building trust and having a good culture, I think.
It's good. And I like the reference to cheat code. That's helpful, because at the end of the day, that's so much of what we're all trying to do is get a hold of like some simple truths that are so simple we can work at them the rest of our lives, but they are that simple. So just, what's the life hack, the cheat code?
Yeah.
It's elegant enough to be that difficult and figure out. So that's awesome. Well, hey man, I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate what you guys are doing at Less Annoying CRM. So if anything out of this, you got great customer feedback for me, but appreciate your insight and perspective and just what you guys are doing. Cause I think it's inspiring for others, not just tech, but anybody to carve out that niche, create the category that fixes the things that bother you. Like what if you flip the things that really bother you about work or corporate life or whatever it is, there's gaps, and sell your time out, your career out to fixing that. It's pretty life-giving, gives you a lot of purpose.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Kevin. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Take care. Have a good day.
See ya.